CTTB. Music podcast.
And we are live.
We're there.
We are. Once more into the breach.
Once more onto the beach.
Well,
No.
no. The social distancing, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not endorsing that.
Indeed. So welcome. Podcast 6 of 2020.
That's amazing.
God, we're actually on, I know, we're actually on track.
That's brilliant.
It's the sixth one.
Take
Podcast.
that.
What's going wrong?
I know. Oh, take that, COVID-19.
It's easy, this podcasting, like.
It's just not the same, though. But do listen. It'll be good.
So, this month, for your delectation, we are reviewing the albums Hayley Williams' Petals for Amour, Isbell and the 400-Unit Reunions, Perfume Genius Set My Heart on Fire Immediately, Moses Sumney Grae, Paradise Lost Obsidian, and Charli XCX How I'm Feeling Now. So, without further ado, we'll start with Hayley Williams.
Yeah.
Debut solo album from Paramore's frontwoman. I think we reviewed their... And they've released 5 albums. I think we reviewed their 4th album, Riot, back in 2015-ish, I think.
Wow. Okay.
But anyway, she decided to have a break from the band and all that jazz and do the solo album that she swore she'd never do, etc., etc., etc. So, Hayley Williams, Pete.
I'm glad we're getting this one out of the way first. It's an interesting album. It's a mature pop. It's one that takes a few listens, that's for sure. And yet, I guess what I found with this particular album was it was a while before I could settle into it when I was listening to it. And it's around about a third of the way in when I first think, okay, this sort of clicks into place. But then I very quickly found that my attention went elsewhere. So I would say I'm glad we got this one out of the way first, because I think of the select 6 that we have this month, this is probably the one I enjoyed the least. I'm trying to say positive things because I don't want to kill off another genre this podcast. So, I think, as I say, it's a mature pop album. It's stylistically, there's quite a lot thrown in there. I think the track Over Yet marks a change, which again, I say is about a third of the way through the album. And all of a sudden there's a very 80s tinged funk to a couple of tracks, which comes back later. I think it's the track Sugar on the Rim, which I quite liked. So those things I liked. And in between that sort of bookend of 80s-ness, there's a bit of a smooth soul feel to the album. But overall, I'm not sure where I am with this particular review, as you can probably tell. I mean, there's a couple of good tracks in there, like Creep In, which is near the beginning, Dead Horse, which is in that sort of middle-ish bit, Sugar on the Rim I've mentioned. But and I actually put at the end of my notes here, by which point I'm not sure where I am. And I think that's kind of how I felt after I'd listened to this. Sorry.
Oh, interesting. Well, for a change on a pop album, I think I probably enjoyed it more than you did, by the sounds of it. I thought this was actually quite an interesting record, because setting up what I think is going to be a theme on this particular podcast, what I quite liked about the record was, from a pop point of view, it seemed to be a record that was taking the stabilizers off and just letting itself go in whatever direction it wanted, rather than just being a generic pop record.
Agree with that.
So it kind of starts off with Simmer, which is probably one of my favourite tracks of the year so far.
Yeah. I like Simmer. Sorry, I like Simmer. That's good.
Yeah. And you think it's going to be an album of that kind of stuff. Then it goes immediately into kind of hairy bass.
Hairy bass,
yes. Bass heavy.
Yeah.
Kind of Tori Amos-esque kind of ballad with Leave It Alone as the next track.
Yeah.
And then goes into Cinnamon, which again is, and Creeping that you've mentioned, which again, but kind of both quite different.
Yeah.
So therefore what I liked about it was I was immediately reminded of artists like Tori Amos, Ruby, Bjork, Regina Spektor, Solange, and all people, and even Halsey, whose album we reviewed a few podcasts ago.
Yeah.
The fact that it was trying to not constrain itself in its popness by just doing one kind of pop. Don't get me wrong, there are some straight out almost classic pop bangers, if you like. So Over Yet, I could imagine Little Mix or the Spice Girls.
I liked Over Yet. Mark to Change, yeah.
Dead Horse, which you've already mentioned, which is, I think, is a song about her previous marriage, because it has a lyric in it, which is there, I held my breath for a decade, dyed my hair blue to match my lips, which I thought was quite nice. Quite a nice line. And there are quite a lot of good lyrics in this podcast, it has to be said.
Yeah.
I also quite liked Roses, Lotus, Violet, Iris, which reminded me a bit of Warpaint from the band we reviewed many years ago. And that's got the band Boy Genius on backing vocals, which are Lucy Dacus, who we've reviewed before, Julian Baker, who I don't think we have, and Phoebe Bridgers. And as an aside, Phoebe Bridgers' new album is out in 2 weeks' time, and her current single, Kyoto, is fab and well worth checking out. So I quite like that. So yeah, I kind of... There were moments when I kind of lost a bit of interest, but overall I thought it was actually quite an impressive pop record.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't quite hit with me, I'm afraid. I feel like, maybe I should give it another chance based on your comments.
Don't be swayed by me. So moving on to latest album from Jason Isbell. This time it's Jason Isbell and the 400 Units Reunions. This is the third album from Mr. Isbell that we've reviewed before. We reviewed the previous two albums, National Sound and Something More Than Free. And this is, I was quite interested. I read an article, interview with him about this, which made me quite interested in the record as a whole, because he was saying that coming into this record, he was very tense during the whole making of the record, worried about whether or not the songs were good enough, whether the album was going to be good enough, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And he said this kind of focus kind of ended up coming across as him being a bit of an asshole.
Oh dear.
And took one boss of the company and made life a bit difficult for his wife, who's also one of the members of the band. And he just couldn't get his head together, which I found quite interesting from a mental health kind of level, and also because he'd said that he'd started to have these feelings when making National Sound, the previous album, but rather than addressing them, he just kind of thought, let me think of reasons why this kind of pressure isn't justifiable, because basically it all stems from the fact that because the two previous albums have been successful, internally he was going, so this album needs to be successful as well. Everyone liked those albums, this needs to be good.
Yeah.
And his opinion of himself was, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Actually, he said that actually was the wrong approach to take, and he actually should have just kind of said, admitted that he had an issue with what was going on and just got on with it. But why I'm mentioning this is because, strangely enough, I think this is a weaker album than the two previous albums.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not to say it's still not a good record, because I still think it is a good record. It's quieter than the last two, certainly. It's a more acoustic-based record, I think, than the last two. Although there's still plenty of room for some lead guitar noodling, definitely going on. So again, some great lyrics going on, songs about being a child and enjoying that experience and despite what's going on around you on Dream Cycle. Past lives and alcoholism, it gets easier. Loss and people missed, so only children.
Yeah.
A killer in the Strong River.
Yeah.
And just a couple of songs about being a parent, be afraid, and letting you go. And I mean, a track that probably would stand out to most people who have known that he was an alcoholic for a long while would be It Gets Easier. And I think, again, it's one of those songs that I think it'd take him a while to get the point where he could reconcile that person was a separate person from him rather than the same person as him, so he could write a song, addressing that. And I think on this song it does it really well. I mean, I love the line. It starts off by saying, "Last night I dreamt I've been drinking, same dream I have about twice a week. I had one glass of wine, woke up feeling fine. That's how I know it was a dream," which I just, And then you've got the main refrain of, "It gets easier, but it never gets easy," which I think is what it must be like if you've ever had any kind of strong addiction that you've had to can for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It gets easier, but never gets easier. So I think that's. Although, that's still not my favourite line on the album. My favourite line on the album is, I think it's in Overseas, which is, two lines, which is, "This used to be a ghost town, but even the ghosts got out."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a strong album. It's a good album. I've played it quite a bit. For me, it doesn't quite hit the heights of the two previous albums. But then again, those two albums were both very, very good in my opinion. So it's still a good record.
I'd agree with a lot of that, actually. I did not enjoy. So it's two negatives here from Pia. I did not enjoy this album as much as his previous stuff. That is true. And it's interesting, the backstory, the context you've given there, because I did find it. Obviously it's angry at times, but with purpose. But that sort of sense of almost forcing channeling the music, it does come through. It's amazing, really, now that you've given the background around the album and some of the thinking that was going on in the artist's head when it was happening. You can sort of see that almost reflected in the music. That sort of irritation. It's exactly that. I think as I was listening to it, I felt frustrated, and it was to the point where I wasn't enjoying it as much, and I thought there's something not quite right here. That said, lyrically, as you've pointed out, very good. Again, unlike, I guess, his previous work, I thought it had more of a harder edge to the sound. I've sort of written here sort of solid American folk rather than country. I think that makes sense to me, but probably to no one else. I think I know what I'm getting at there. What I'm getting at there is it sounds like, it's American folk music is country, isn't it? I guess, but it just sounded sort of that step apart from perhaps some of his previous stuff that I kind of felt I had to make that distinction. And again, it tells, tales of a world on fire, tales of addiction and loss and sadness. I mean, and again, some of the tracks you mentioned, Only Children, I also like Be Afraid and St. Peter's Autograph, which I thought was clever. Yeah. So there's stuff in here I did get into, but yeah, perhaps just not to the extent of the previous couple of albums we have enjoyed. And he's one of the artists that we've seen live as well. I mean, I think it's a couple of years ago now, but feels like fairly recent in the memory.
It does indeed. Okay, so moving on to an artist that we certainly haven't reviewed before, Perfume Genius, fifth album from Michael Hadrius, to give him his alter ego proper name. Set my heart on fire immediately. Did it set your heart on fire immediately, Peter?
I think it's the best album title we have this month. Again, it's a very varied album, both in terms of genres and again in terms of vocal styles. Vocal styles in particular. It was very reminiscent at times. There's that whole Flaming Lips, Tame Impala thing going on. And then there was other tracks.
I did write Tame Impala stroke Yesayer.
Yesayer, of course, yes. And then there were other times, I actually written down, there's a whole Roy Orbison thing going on as well. The track One More Try, it even sounded that sort of mellow, how do I describe it? Sort of almost 60s sound,
Yeah.
With Orbison style vocals across the top. So on that track in particular, it popped up somewhere else later on the album. So I found again this was and at times fascinating, varied, very interesting album. That sounds like faint praise, but compared to perhaps the Hayley Williams piece, I preferred this. Both are in a way experimental, both in terms of the genre and message they want to convey. I preferred this. I also like the track Nothing at All.
Yes. Agree with that. Good song.
Good. Glad we agree on that. What did you think?
Well, I'd heard the single On the Floor played on the radio. Six Music, which is what, off the back of that was why I put it in as one of the albums to review, because I thought, that's an interesting track. Let's just say it has that it appealed to me because it had that kind of Tame Impala, Yesayer type vibe to it.
Yeah.
So I thought, that'd be interesting. And then you put the album on, expecting the album to be that. And it's kind of not, really.
Yeah, it's not at all.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, don't get me wrong.
No. It's different.
So you do have that kind of out-and-out pop song of On the Floor, Without You, I'd say, very similar, good foot-tapping type tune. But then you've got some kind of almost kind of torch song, ballady type stuff, so Whole Life that starts off Jason, which is clearly a song about a lover. And then you've got almost kind of ethereal kind of moments and incantations. So on track Moonbend, it's a very atmospheric kind of thing. And then when you just think it can't get any weirder, you've then also got a couple of tracks, So Nothing at All being one of them, Some Dream another, and then Describe, where it is at its most My Bloody Valentine, Dinosaur Jr. sounding, which is not what you'd expect after hearing the first kind of track, thinking, what clearly going to have now is a My Bloody Valentine track to follow it up. So I did kind of like where the album was coming from. I read something that he said that when he was writing the album, it was written with dance in mind, because he'd been doing lots of work with choreographers recently. So that was kind of interesting, thinking about how the music played out. Also, the kind of thinking of that, and also the kind of structure and how the structure and the eclecticism of the tracks reminded me of, to a certain degree, of how some of the early Kate Bush albums are constructed. Going back to On the Floor, Phoebe Bridgers, who I mentioned on the Hayley Williams album, she also sings backing vocals on the Floor on this album, so she becomes a a pink artist for this particular podcast appearing for the second time in the podcast without actually being the main artist. So yeah, I thought this was quite enjoyable and quite an interesting record. I mean, it's certainly all over the place, but I think I've decided this year I'm quite into albums that are a bit all over the place.
All over the place, but yeah, I like the all over the placeness of this one though.
Yeah. Speaking of all over the place, we now move on to
where are we going? Where are we going with this?
Moses Sumney, Grae, second album from this American singer-songwriter. Double album. Part 1 was released in February. And the second bit came out last month. But you can listen to it all as one album if you listen to it on streaming services. So if you're thinking double albums, you're probably thinking Use Your Illusion, parts 1 and 2. It's very similar. And it's definitely another entry in this month, so I'm going to just do my thing and leave others to try and pigeonhole me musically competition. He's definitely an artist because he's a black artist who's certainly been, people have tried to pigeonhole him in the R&B artist category, which he objects to quite strongly. But to quote my daughter when she walked in, when Conveyor, one of the tracks was playing earlier on, she said, "Well, this is strange music, Daddy." And I walked out. And I think it's fair to say that certain people won't hear another record quite like this year. It's an amalgamation of soul, jazz, folk, experimental indie rock, spoken word interludes. Quite often some of these things are happening during the same track. And my first thought was obviously Prince. The guy has an amazing falsetto voice.
Me too.
And particularly at the start of the album, tracks like Cut Me and In Bloom are very much things that would not be at Prince's albums. So there's big slice of Prince, bits of Justin Vernon in there, elements of Bowie. And then interestingly, one of the main producers on the album is Daniel Lopatin, who we have reviewed on this podcast before as 10 Tricks Point Never. So the sonic landscape of the record. Yes, the sonic landscape of the record is very weird. And this is the album that I've come back to the most on the podcast. I'm not sure if it's my favourite album of the podcast, but it's the one I've come back to most because I found it the most interesting record to listen to, and I keep getting more things out of it the more I come back to it. That said, I think the first album, if you like, which is tracks 1 to 12, so at the end of Polly, I think is definitely more stronger than the Two Dogs to Before You Go on the second album, which is a bit more samey, I think, the kind of second part of the record. That goes much more into the just straight out kind of, dare I say it, R&B, soul kind of bass with the vocal going over the top. But the first half of the record particularly, I think, is just really, really engaging. So you got things like Colour, which is a wonderful summer's day jazz ballad. Also, and which reminded me of Bowie and things like that. Virile, which has a great line, and I think it's you want to slip right in, amp up the masculine. You've got the wrong idea, son, which I thought was quite good. Because again, given the title of the album is Grae, the overarching theme lyrically seems to be that kind of thing of, and also about the pigeonholing thing of not wanting to be pinned down to be black and white.
Yes.
Being black and white, and everything being that kind of in between thing that things are, how dare you tell me that I have to be masculine? black or white or whatever. A challenging, impressive musical achievement is how I would probably describe this record, actually.
I agree. I found, again, like you, I'm not sure I necessarily enjoyed this one the most, but it is the one that I've come back to the most. So I had the same experience there. And it was a very inventive album, a combination of influences blended into something quite unique, very unique and original. And like you, the theme of the album, Grae, and also reflected, I think, in a couple of the tracks as well. I mean, you mentioned the lyric in Virile, and track titles like Jack Jill and Neither Nor sort of hint at that sort of duality of identity.
Neither Nor is a great track.
Yeah, and I cited that. I think that's one of my favourites from Part 1. As a double album, again released, I found that the Part 1 and 2 were quite distinctive. Another more recent comparison you could have drawn was, of course, Nine Inch Nails' Ghosts 5 and 6.
Who could forget it?
Who could forget that? But it's not, and actually, I sort of half jokingly, because I think the sort of, again, that soundscape, that's sort of very much almost it's not Trent Reznor, but that's sort of very much the sort of industrial soundscape, particularly on the track Conveyor, which your daughter cited as a bit different, with its industrial loops, which are present elsewhere on the album. It had that sort of feel to it, so not too far a dafter comparison to make. Again, I thought Part 1 zipped by. I think the first half of Part 1 was better, but I actually found Part 1 was very good. Overall, I liked Virile, Cut Me, Conveyor, I've mentioned, Colorla, which you mentioned Bowie. I've actually written Jazz Bowie.
Yes, Jazz Bowie.
Definite Jazz Bowie at the start there, in the intro and elsewhere as well. I thought definitely Bowie is there. Part 2, instrumentally, production felt smooth. It felt more R&B, smoother. But again, if it was smoother, I thought it perhaps lyrically more of an introspective tone. So a little bit darker maybe.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
But again, it also flew by, and I mean, Two Dogs, again, lyrically very interesting, very topical as well. You think about where we are right now. But then Me in 20 Years, I really enjoyed. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
So across the two parts, Virile, Cut Me, and Me in 20 Years, probably my 3 tracks. But yeah, no, Part 1, excellent. Part 2, good to very good. I really enjoyed this album. Actually,
yeah, I like Me in 20 Years as well. I also really liked the 2 final tracks on the album, Bless Me and then Before You Go.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And that sort of, there was a reprise of the opening track from Part 1 as well. The sort of little definition of Insula that's used in track 1, Insula, sort of defined.
Oh yeah, then I come to Isolation, which obviously again quite appropriate for our current times. But.
Yes, very much so. So yeah, overall, you know what? The more I talk about this album, the more I admit I have enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it's a grower.
My family are not as keen on it as I am.
No.
But again, I think it's because it does involve work.
It does, but it's rewarding.
Moving on and changing musical tact, because that's what we like doing on this podcast. We move on to Paradise Lost, Obsidian. And whilst I'm sure Pete was about to tell you the piece of information, I will inform you that This is the 16th studio album from this Yorkshire band.
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah. Pretty much the same lineup for 32 years, bar being a bit Spinal Tap and changing drummers a few times.
Yes.
Are apparently considered to be the pioneers of the death doom genre and an influence on bands that have emerged since, such as Nightwish, Him, and Lacuna Coil, amongst others.
Ah, Lacuna Coil.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Yeah, I believe we once upon a time, way back, time, reviewed one of their albums as well.
Yeah.
So, were you lost in paradise, Pete?
I didn't know what to expect with this album. So I
please do, but I tell you what, just funny though. Despite the fact I'm the person that puts the album list to get together and pick stuff, I then spend I spent 20 minutes at the start of the week listening to the latest album by Obsidian, who are a separate band.
Oh, right.
But usually a metal band of the growling nature. But it was going on. I was thinking, I'm sure I read a review somewhere saying that some of this stuff is meant to sound a bit kind of like Sisters of Mercy and the Mission. This doesn't sound like that. And then I realised clearly that when I'd asked the A word to play something, I'd actually confused the name of the album with a band name, so I was therefore listening to the wrong record.
The A word. Is she listening, Scott? Is she there? It's funny because my missus is actually in the other room watching the A word on TV. Quite enjoying it as well. What did I think? We've gone off track there.
Sorry.
It started quietly, so imagine. I kid you not, because we've listened to a few of these now. Imagine my sheer delight, the grin that spread across my face when the growling started. On the track Darker Thoughts. It then goes all a bit Depeche Mode. It does. There's a whole... Yeah, there's a whole... And that comes back in the album. All right, not necessarily Depeche Mode, but that sort of... there are moments of...
That influence, yes.
Yeah. There are moments throughout the album when Psychedelic Furs or that sort of new wave, it wasn't growl, 100% growl. And when it settles down, as an album, it's more into that sort of doom metal mode. Sorry, halfway through. But it was kind of up and down vocally, which meant I actually quite enjoyed the beginning of the album. And it started well. And it ended okay. And again, one of the tracks that I liked towards the end, Hope Does Young, and Defiler, just to prove I did listen to it all the way through. But it did, I felt this one did sag somewhat slightly in the middle. As it probably treaded, to the non-doom black metal connoisseur, it probably was lost on me, but I just felt it went into sort of, in the middle. It was obviously not for me. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Overall, enjoyed the start, enjoyed the end. A solid album, dare I say.
Well, yeah. Yeah, this is quite fun, because obviously it kicks off with some, gentle vocals, acoustic guitars, and a full string section, before then launching into being feels Nephilim, the Mission, but with daddy growling.
Yeah.
And as you've pretty much said, as regular listeners will know of the podcast, we do like a good death metal growl here on CTTB music. And it's good that we managed to get the quota in this particular thing. I kind of agree with what you said, pretty much all the way through. I thought this album was surprisingly fun, but most surprisingly fun in the first half of the album. So
yes.
The opening track, Dark Thoughts, as you say. Yeah. Really good fun. Then go into Fall from Grace, which I had this odd feeling that it was almost like, because the guy's normal singing voice, singer's called Nick Holmes, his normal voice reminded me a lot of Greg Lake, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yes. That's what I mean.
I had this really bizarre thing of listening to basically something that was like Fields and Nephilim stroke Sisters of Mercy, but with Greg Lake singing.
Yes.
Which was totally bizarre, and I couldn't get that in my head for a while. But I thought, kind of works.
Yeah.
And the third track, Ghosts, which is just full-on Sisters of Mercy. And I was, at that point, I was taken back to my mid-80s teenage self, thinking, God, at that time, I would have just loved this album. I mean, just really loved it. Now, as you say, it's all right. It's quite enjoyable. But it does sort of, I kind of thought, once you get past, actually for me, probably once you get past Devil Embrace, the fourth track, it kind of starts after that point getting a bit samey.
Yeah.
Moves through to the second
in the middle.
album.
Yeah.
And it's still fine. The songs are still okay. The musicianship is still pretty impressive. But I got to the end of the album thinking, I'm still probably not going to check out their previous 15 albums. Whilst possibly still giving Darker Thoughts and Ghosts another spin a couple of times in the next few weeks. But, hey, been going for over 32 years. Good on them, apparently.
Yeah.
So we finish up returning to pop. Charli XCX, How I'm Feeling Now, and this is the second time we reviewed Miss Acheson's output. Last time was back in 2014 with her second album, Sucker. We probably would have reviewed her last album that came out last year had we been doing podcasts last year. Let's not go down that hole.
No, let's not go down that hole again.
So anyway, this is an interesting album on a number of levels. It is a true lockdown album in the sense that on the 6th of April she announced that she was going to make an entire album in 6 weeks, and would share most of the steps to it, including lyric writing, video shooting, and various other things online via her Instagram account, which she did. And 6 weeks later, on 15th of May, the album was not only recorded but released. So 6 weeks it was done.
Wow. Did not know that.
Some of the ideas and the music on the album did exist pre-April the 6th. However, still impressive. So taking all that into account, by rights, this album really should be a pile of shite. But actually, I think it's actually far from that. It's certainly... in some ways, I'm glad we didn't review last year's collab heavy album, Charli, because I was a bit indifferent to that. I kind of feel that the kind of forced time frame on this record has focused this admitted workaholic songwriter into not overthinking or complicating things. So therefore, we've got an album that's 11 tracks, 35 minutes, and the songs are mostly short and snappy. So it kicks off with Pink Diamond, which has that kind of industrial drumming kind of thing going on.
Banging.
And actually, bizarrely, third time it took 3 listens of this track to get to listen to it. I think something missing from this. And I was thinking, what's missing from that track is crunchy guitars from sleigh bells. There's some sleigh bells guitars in there.
Right.
Because it had everything else, just thinking, no, it just needs some, Infinity guitars tonight, kind of guitars in there. Which also were needed in C 2.0 later on in the album as well. Similar kind of thing. Both songs need to be remixed with some sleigh bells guitars in there. You've heard it here first. Outside of that, there's once again ample evidence of why she's very much in demand from other songwriters and artists to work with, to collaborate on songs. So you got tracks like Forever, Detonate, Enemy, Visions, which is the big dance club ending to this record, all potential earworm tracks. Perhaps, as you might expect, the lyrics here and there are not amazing, but then again, we have had a podcast full of stuff that's full of very, very good lyrics.
Very good lyrics this time. Very good lyrics.
So frankly, we reviewed lots of albums over the year with people who've had much more time to write lyrics, and they've stuck up with stuff that's shit anyway.
Exactly.
Never saying that. I did like the thing in Anthems, again, a perfect simple lyric which I liked, which is...
Oh, here we go. Go on.
Yeah. Eat and cereal, try my best of physical, lose myself in video, staring out into oblivion, all my friends are invisible. Which again is a perfect lyric summing up lockdown and not being able to go out and do anything and explaining what you're doing in life.
Okay. Yeah, no, I pulled another one out.
You can tell me in a second. But
I'll come to that.
Overall, I think, all things considered, considering it is an album that was knocked together that quickly, it's pretty good.
Again, we're in step on this one. On that track you just mentioned, the Anthems, I also pulled out the lyric again. I didn't know the context. I did, unlike with Moses, I didn't do my research here. And the context, the lyric I pulled out was, "I just want to go to parties and feel the heat of all the other bodies." And I just thought, that's just a perfect social distancing lyric, isn't it? I also thought, and this will make you and one of our listeners chuckle, I also thought that lyric was very hold steady. I could imagine Craig singing that one. I enjoyed this album. I think Pink Diamonds, Barry and Enemy, likewise. I also pulled out Party for You. Again, it has a great industrial sound working alongside some quite flowery synths. You know how I love my flowery synths. So the two combined was just excellent. I actually love the drum and bass of C 2.0. Maybe it did lack something and a bit of the, instrumental elsewhere, but I thought that was great. Considering the speed at which this has been pulled together, and this is why people want to work with that. It's because it's just brilliant in terms of the time devoted to producing it. It's just everything from dance floor through to electro punk, drum bass. Yeah, I mean, what more can you say? I mean, we've gone on quite a long time already, so perhaps I won't say anything more. But this is the album perhaps I enjoyed more than the other album. But is this the best album? Well, we shall see in a moment. Drum roll.
Robert, is it your favourite album of the podcast?
I just want to go to parties and feel the heat of all the other bodies. I thought that was quite good. No, do you know what? Prior to actually talking about it and talking out loud, and this is why we do this thing, right? I'd have said, yes, this would probably be my album of the podcast. But actually, on reflection, I am going to go with Moses Sumney because I just think there's more to discover and unpack there. But they're both really great records, very much of their time and of the moment as well.
Yeah, I also am going to pick Moses Sumney for similar reasons, and the fact that, as you say, it's one of those records that we've had a few of these records over the years where you just listen to them and there's something about them that makes you want to play them again to kind of find more in them. Even though they might not have immediately grabbed you in a kind of, hey, sing along, this is a great kind of happy, chappy kind of record. There's something there that makes you kind of go, I want to listen to that again.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to that again. I'm not sure why I want to listen to that again. But I want to listen to that again.
Yeah, it's just there.
Makes me want to listen again.
Yeah.
Well, the Charli XCX front and on the Hayley Williams front as well, I would say, again, both those two records are an example of what we've already experienced so far this year of I would say, a return to some really good pop records coming out. So obviously we did the last podcast.
Yeah.
Halsey, the podcast before. I think proper, grown-up, interesting pop music is having a resurgence as well this year.
I definitely agree. Absolutely agree. I think it's a good year. It's a good year for proper grown-up pop music. And despite all the madness, I think 2020 musically is shaping up to be really good.
It is, both on that side of things and on the Moses Sumney, Fiona Apple.
Yeah. Interesting,
quirky, need to listen to it kind of thing as well. So
yeah.
So far so good, as I believe someone once said.
Absolutely.
Before we leave, we can't go without discussing something you sent me a link to earlier today.
I thought you'd forgotten.
No. Guardian, who often produce clickbait have created the 100 greatest UK number ones.
Oh, I can just tell from the tone of your voice where this is going.
And number one is the Pet Shop Boys West End Girls. Before you said it,
go on.
I told Diane this, who's a big fan of this song. Genuinely a big fan of the song. But even she was like kind of going, no, see, for her, she thinks it's a song of its time, not of a lasting legacy type thing, even though she still likes it as a song. So she was almost as aghast as I was to find out that it's number one.
Yeah.
But since you're the expert,
oh, yeah.
you're alive and right round to number 5 as well, so that's also, I would say, questionable.
Yeah, very, very questionable, that one. As the resident pet head, I'll be honest with you, I was surprised as well. And if you go on to read if you find the article on The Guardian, go on to read the interview with Neil Tennant, he actually cites Good Vibrations as his choice. So there you go.
Yes. Well, there you go. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Number 11, Good Vibrations.
Good Vibrations, number 11. And actually,
one of the ones in the right place.
I'd sort of seen this in the background. I hadn't really been following it. And actually, you look at the top 20. I mean, West End Girls, in the context of the list, I think it's definitely in the top 15, 20. I question the Beatles' choice that was in there as well. I mean, She Loves You is obviously the record that broke America, but well, that's a whole other podcast where you start with the Beatles number ones, but or even
it's a good classic pop song.
It is a good classic pop song. Don't get me wrong. Let's not start on that one tonight. I did question a few choices in the top, also
surprisingly, the top 10 has Prodigy Firestarter, which, again, don't get me wrong, I love Firestarter as a song. However, in the top 10 best number ones,
it was in Prodigy's defence. It was very impactful at the time, and I guess I wonder if that's what they're going for, really, because it's like Di said, West End Girls. It's very much, in one way you could look at it, it's very much of a time, but yet it still does get regular airplay in various places. It's not my favourite number one of theirs, but I can see why it comes out as the critics' choice for them for number one.
Yeah, what was interesting is the highest placed nude record wasn't. That's new, not nude, I should make. Was number 19, which was Lil Nas X, Old Town Road remix featuring Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah.
That was number 19.
And we're back to Nine Inch Nails again, because obviously that samples Ghosts 4.
Yeah. I don't get me wrong.
As well.
Obviously, it's one of those tracks whether you need to be living under a rock for the last 12 months not to have heard it. Even if you're not aware you've heard it, believe me, you have heard this song. But still, I was amazed that it was featured so highly.
Yes.
Although, in some ways, it's pleasing that the top 100 wasn't just full of things from years and years ago.
Yeah. To be fair, yes. Yeah. So I get it, but then
again, it still appears above "Call Me Maybe," and "Call Me Maybe" is clearly a better track.
Yeah, that is clearly a better track. So there you go. As you said at the top, classic clickbait, and we've just spent 5 minutes talking about it.
Yeah, people can sit there thinking, "Thank God they didn't go for the whole podcast talking about that."
Yeah, we could have done a whole podcast there. I think we almost did.
We did. Anyway, that's another one done. Telling my workmates who decided to tune into this episode, hello. Obviously, if they had, they wouldn't have actually got this far, so it's mad. But,
if they made it this far, well done. Thank you very much.
It's still the case.
Yeah, indeed.
Until next time, farewell.
Stay safe.